So I suppose we should start. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. It's not easy to be outside, and I'm really sorry I was not able to join in person this seminar. So welcome everybody to this session on sustainable agriculture, food security, and biodiversity, balancing production and conservation goals. So the whole nature of this session is that by its very nature, agriculture is at the core of humanity's ecological challenge. That means how to sustainably facilitate and manage the interaction between men, other living creatures, and non-living entities. On the one hand, agriculture is essential to the satisfaction of mankind's basic needs and aspiration to high-quality standards of living. And on the other, it affects the health of natural ecosystems. And we may have entered a sort of vicious circle because feeding mankind produces several types of greenhouse gases, of course, carbon dioxide through deforestation and energy used for mechanization, but also nitrous oxide through the use of fertilizers, and of course, methane produced by cattle. Intensification has also contributed to a loss of soil productivity and biodiversity. And in turn, biodiversity degradation and climate change impact negatively on agricultural productivity. Higher frequency of extreme climate events, loss in agricultural yields due to soil degradation, changing plant pathology. So we are here to discuss this tension between agricultural production and biodiversity protection, and for that matter, climate change mitigation. Should we prioritize agricultural production to meet food security concerns, especially in developing countries, or should we focus on biodiversity protection and what that requires? With us to discuss this potential dilemma, we have Joe Puri, connected from IFAD, International Vice President for Strategy and Knowledge of the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, and adjunct professor at Columbia University. Joe has worked previously at the Green Climate Fund, the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation, 3IE, UNEP, the World Bank, and UNDP. And we have Elena Lazos-Chavarro, who is with you in Quito, professor and researchers at ISUNAM, the Institute of Social Science Research at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Elena has been a coordinating lead author for IPBS, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So we are lucky enough to have both of you, Joe and Elena. And Joe, starting with you, you are at IFAD. Your job is to promote agricultural development. What does this mean in terms of addressing this tension between biodiversity protection and production? Is agricultural development akin to more production?
Thank you so much, Pierre. Can you hear me well? Elena, can you hear me well?
Yes, perfect,
okay.
Joe. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much first for having me here. One would think that given the organization that I'm coming from, that I would actually be reversing roles with Elena, and that I would actually take the position that Elena is taking today, which is that, you have to take the middle path. And ordinarily, in most situations, that's what I would argue for. But today we're at a very different part of the evolution of the Earth as well as of the populations. So I have two headline comments to make in this context. The first is that we are where we are today in terms of violating planetary boundaries because of the arrogance that human beings have shown. Since Silent Spring was written by Rachel Carson, and I hope you've all read it, we know that human beings have thought that everything should be subservient to their needs. It is for this reason that we are at a position, and I know Elena knows this and Pierre knows this, that 6 of our planetary boundaries have been transgressed. Of those, biodiversity is one of them, which is both the functional aspect of biodiversity, but also the genetic diversity that we have, right? Which means we are on a path of no return. And that is dangerous. The second headline comment that I want to make is I want everyone to remember the number 1/3. What is the number 1/3? 1/3 is the overall amount of emissions that get contributed to by food systems into the atmosphere. So 1/3 of the overall emissions that we have today are contributed by food systems. But 1/3 is also the amount of food that gets lost or wasted every year. 1/3. So we're losing 1/3 of the food that we produce. Which means what? Which means that actually we are already producing enough food. We are producing enough food, ladies and gentlemen, for 10 billion people. Forget the 7 billion that we are at, or the 8 billion. We're currently producing enough food worldwide for 10 billion people. But the reason we still have undernutrition, the reason we still have malnutrition, the reason that we have obesity is not because we don't produce enough food. It's because it gets lost or wasted, or we're producing the wrong kind of food. So what I want to really argue for is that the solution for hunger, for food insecurity, lies not in producing more. It lies actually in changing the way we are producing, the way we are distributing, the way we are investing in our overall systems. So the solution is elsewhere. And if we want to really think about a livable planet, a planet that is going to not just be catering to the arrogance of human beings, then we've got to think far more about swinging the pendulum the other way. Because for the past 100 years, we have focused on ourselves as human beings and how nature has to be subservient to us, rather than treating nature for its own right, which is that nature and biodiversity will conserve the earth, will ensure the longevity of the planet, and will ensure the longevity of the human race. But we have to ensure that we are not continuously trading off and holding humans first. And that's the argument I'm going to continue to make as we go along. Thanks very much, Pierre, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Joe, for launching the debate so strongly. Elena, what's your take on this?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And I had planned to speak in Spanish because, first of all, we are in Latin America, and second, I am Latin American. But I see that the public is more in the English, so I will switch to English, although I have already planned my in Spanish. But well, I think that there are some points that Joe and I will be agreeing upon, in the sense of many of the data that she throw, in the sense of 1/3 of emissions contributed by food systems, 1/3 of the waste of food, no, and that we don't need more production. And I will then pick a phrase of when they are selling the milk in UK, and I came to Oxford now, and it was like, it's not the cow, it's the how. And I like this expression in a sense that we can also say it for, it's not the maize, it's how, no? Or it is not the cattle itself or the cow, but it's the how. And only I had prepared in the sense that in this discussion about conservation and food production, what we have to put into this phrase, no, of the panel, that they are saying food security and conservation and sustainable development, what we have to bring in, it is food justice or social justice, social equity, no? So then where can we put the really, what are we talking about? Where's the cow? Where's the how? And in that sense, we have to always be saying our decisions are based on equity and social justice, or are based only in economical aspects. And that doesn't mean that will bring justice, and that doesn't mean that will bring equity. So only to put it then in the sense that what kind of model do we want when we are talking about food production, and what kind of model of countries and of planet when we are talking about conservation of biodiversity? Do we want to continue as usual, or we want to make really a turn about it? And in this sense, it will be like in the planetary boundaries, or what Joe said, there is the return of no path. And in that sense, also it's a return to no path in the sense of social justice? Are we continuing to make all our decisions based on injustice and inequity, or we are now in this return of no path in the sense of what are we pretending to then change? And only I wanted to bring like 2 examples that very, very short ones. And once I'm sure that you all know about Windy, in Uganda, about the mountain gorillas, and how do they decided to get rid of the Pygmy and the Mumbutu indigenous people. What they declare about this Windy Reserve was, well, we are competing 3 species. The gorillas, the chimpanzees, and the pygmy. So we get rid of the pygmy and we throw them out of their territory, because then we will be having more conservation of the mountain gorillas. And what it will be the first question, it is, what was the base of that decision? Conservation only? And what about justice? And what about equity? And now, of course, the Uganda government, what it's offering, it's all the tours to visit the Mumbuti, the pygmies, and they are showing how they used to live in their territory, and they are selling themselves in a very ethno situation and pretending that they are as they used to be. And the other case that I want to bring very quickly, it was the Guarani case. And just Camilo, he spoke about the Yasuni Park. I think that if we are in Ecuador, we should have spoken very much about this case. They won, and it was here in this university where there were a lot of discussions there in the Blue Saloon that we were yesterday. And there were so many aspects and so many perspectives that the Ecuadorian discussed and that they brought into the convocatoria, to decide if Yasuni will be conserved in the sense of no fossil fuel industry more, the petroleum industry more, or it will be much for conservation. And you can see all the aspects of what they are bringing. And also, there were anthropologists there that they were speaking about social justice for the Guarani, and to respect the Guarani, they decided and they declare this cultural isolation, and I think it is very important to respect that as human rights. But then afterwards, that were like my 2 examples in the sense of how do we speak of Galapagos, how we speak about the biodiversity of the Yasuni, and have we really learned from what the Guarani, for example, they are saying, even though in Yasuni, they have a higher biodiversity than the Galapagos, But, well, so in this sense, talking about agricultural and food security or food sovereignty, then what we say is, well, there are a very high heterogeneous agricultural systems, And what we have to consider, well, there are like 30 variables. I am not going to talk about the 30 variables when we are talking about this great heterogeneity of agricultural systems, but only I will come to 3. And it will be land tenure. So then also we will say who owns the land, who owns the resources, the seeds, for example, or the all the infrastructure processes, and what is the access to the markets, And this will define us like the different agricultural systems that we want for the future. Do we want these big monocultures and having the control big companies? So my question will be for you, what type of food systems do we want? In the sense of a food systems that will be produced by smallholders with a big agrobiodiversity, that they are taking care of their soils, that of course there is a lot of inputs there in the labor input, or we wanted our food that will be produced by big transnationals, the seeds under the control of those transnationals, and then they will have more like conservation in other areas, and we can have natural protected that they can expel the people that they own those territories. So that is also the question. What are our food systems should look like in the future for Ecuador, for Mexico, or for our countries? And that point that I was going to bring in also in these agricultural differences is the land labor, the labor, the rural labor, in the sense that what we see, it is all these migrations that are coming from the rural parts, and we can see it now. Mexico is the bridge to the United States, and so we are seeing caravans coming from South America, from Central America, but also from Africa, also from Asia, that are coming for the North American dream. So what are we expecting? And they are this expulsion of migrants, of rural migrants. So then there are a lot of contradictions in what we want as a conservation areas or as the food production systems, and how can we deal within a new model of doing a new or past new agriculture with conservation. So I will stop there, Pierre, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena. Well, let me challenge both of you, Joe and Elena, on the how. And again, starting with Joe, it seems to me that the dynamics of what you have analyzed are in tension. I would suggest that the food issue that we have now is a very short-term one. To the extent that food security has deteriorated in many poor countries. We have problems of hunger, we have problem of overweight and underweight of children, and we have to act now. While addressing the issue of the 1/3 that is wasted is going to take time. So it seems to me that the waste is a given. We want to change it. We want, of course, to reduce it very substantially, but that will take time. And in between, we have to take it as a given. And given that, we need more production. And that's, do you agree with that or not?
Pierre, if you're, so I'm going to come in and take the controversial view that actually, well, I have 3 points to make. First, I don't think we require more production. I think, like I said, the solution lies elsewhere. The solution lies in reducing our food loss and waste. The solution lies in even taking the current food systems that we have and focusing, and I want to take up Elena's challenge a little bit here. The inexorable pull that we have with respect to agricultural patterns that we are seeing is towards monocultural large land holdings. IFAD, the organization that I work with, focuses on smallholder farmers. 80% of the overall farming systems globally are considered family farms. But there's only a small proportion of those that are considered smallholders. So if you want to count it as 0 to 5 hectares or 0 to 10 hectares, a smaller proportion of those are considered smallholders. But the important thing is that smallholders as an overall contributor to overall food are only, again, that number, 1/3. 1/3 of the overall food that we produce today is produced by smallholder farmers. The rest of it is produced, the 2/3 is produced by these monocultural large farms. Monocultural large farms are unfortunately already in the space where we have made biodiversity, nature-based solutions, agroecology essentially subservient to the needs of human beings. And it's an effort to truly correct that swing of the pendulum that I'm arguing that our focus for the next 50 years has to be to regrow, redevelop biodiversity as the main focus of our efforts today, because we are on a trajectory of no return. If you look at the World Benchmarking Alliance, actually they just came out with a report 3 weeks ago, looking at the top 350 agri-food companies of the world. And those include Danone, Pepsi, Kellogg, Post, you name it, yeah? And what do they find? They find that, yeah, most of these companies, which we all know and we have all learned to love, produce food that is not healthy, distribute food that health and nutrition is actually nowhere in their overall strategic framework. They are not paying attention to the spillover of their production practices onto environment and climate. And they are also not paying attention to human rights or to equity. So this World Benchmarking Alliance report actually lays it out and has scorecarded, and I'm going to invite the audience as well to go to their report and look at their scores, etc. But the key thing is, the concern for me is that if I was to make a decision for the world today, I would say we've got to change the norms within which we are working. Our norms, unfortunately, are very much human-based. So let me give you another example. When within IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, we were looking at developing a biodiversity strategy. And this is a space or a thing that most international organizations that also are looking at the global public good do, right? This is an exercise we all go through. We were looking at a biodiversity strategy. You know, the first version of the biodiversity strategy that came to my desk essentially focused on the needs, how biodiversity could support human beings rather than looking at biodiversity for its own value and the contribution that it makes to a sustainable planet. I had to push it back to my team and to say, sorry, the end goal for us is that biodiversity and ecosystems and ecosystem variance and diversity has to be the end goal, because we know that the ecosystem services that they produce are far more important and have intergenerational spillover effects that we are completely ignoring if we continue to focus on human beings. So that's my first point. But the second point also, and Lalela, I really appreciated the Uganda example that you provided, as well as the Ecuador one. I did my PhD actually looking at the economics of protected areas. And one of the challenges that I found, and I looked at it in northern Thailand and also looked at how ethnic tribes and biodiversity and agricultural production was all being served within the context of protected areas and reserve forests in northern Thailand. Now, the big challenge of that is that I think, again, as human beings, we continue to think that the models of conservation that we have are very much exclusionary. We think it's either human beings or biodiversity. And I think that in itself is a huge fault of the model that we have adopted. If we change the norm today and made biodiversity and ecological variance the end game for us, I think it would drive us to create far different models for human life, for the planning that we do with respect to conservation, the planning that we do with respect to food systems as well. And I think that's the key point. Change the norm. We are not, the reason that we are continuing to go down this path of monocultural large farms, of exclusionary planning systems, of protected areas that throw out indigenous people, of systems that do not focus on equity, is because our norm is very much focused on human beings. And then the third point that I wanted to make is basically with respect to no time left now. We are at a critical point. I think we have to take that responsible, urgent action today to change the norm, because we don't have the time to reverse the path on which we are currently located. And so, Pierre, I want to submit to you that no, at this point, if you made me sort of the planner for planet Earth, I would say shift the norm in favor of biodiversity, conservation. Human greed will always come and play a path, but we've got to hold biodiversity as the key value. Human beings will take care of themselves. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joe. I think my question was rather on the how, and when you say we have got to change the norms, my question to you will be, in the next turn of speaking, will be, who is we? We as intellectuals, we as advocates, we as decision makers. But how do you do you organize this process of changing norms? It won't happen autonomously. It won't happen naturally, and I'm not sure that advocacy is enough. So let's turn to Elena and ask her to react as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that there are a lot of coincidences of what Joe said with what I will be saying. Only in her last phrase, I will be like a little bit disagreeing in the sense of put biodiversity on the top and then afterwards, well, about food security, well, men or humans will be taking care of themselves. Yes and no, because it is depending on, because what we have to assure, it is the control of the territories under the local people. It could be indigenous people or local communities. And in that sense, if that is fulfilled, then afterwards, of course, they have to be deciding which are their priorities. And I think that, for example, in the case of the Yasuni Park with the Waraoni, what they have been doing, it is, okay, they say no to the oil industry. At the beginning, it was not so clear, but afterward, because we know how the oil industries and the extractivism industries, they divide the communities. But well, in this sense, what we have, it is, they say no. But of course, they say not no to the food production. Of course, they have their food productions, their food systems, and what they have been doing, as many other countries and it's in many other indigenous people and local communities have been doing, it is in the how, And they have been trying to say, okay, agroecological points with a lot of agrobiodiversity, with very low inputs of agrochemicals and even no agrochemicals, and with organic productions and with agroforestry, for example, all the coffee production that has been produced in Colombia, in Ecuador, in Mexico, with shade, and how, Nestle now is forcing all the farmers to change to no canopy. So what they are forcing, it is to have a coffee of bad quality under no shade. So then we see the force of the big transnationals as Nestle that are pushing a change in the agricultural systems. And that has to be very clear for us as consumers, in the sense, are we consuming Nestle products or not? And then what I was a little bit disagreeing, it was in the last point. People will be taking care of themselves. Yes, if there were no transnationals, But as we have such a big force of the agro industry and the agro food industries as transnationals, and what we are eating, it is what you, Joe, said about very low nutritious food, high calorie, and the problems of obesity that Pierre was saying, or the undernourishment, that we have these at the same time, all these processes at the same time. So how can then we change on that? And when we say about to be bringing the agroecological production, it's not only the change of the food system, it's the change of your mind, it's the change of your ontological relations with nature and with humans. How do we care of nature, and how do we care about humans also? It is, if we are caring of humans, we are caring of nature. How this has to be the basic the basic components of the food systems. And in that sense, biodiversity, yes, but under the control of the people that are living in that territories. I would be really, from my point of view, of course, against that there will be coming bioprospection, because what we have seen are a lot of examples that these companies that are looking for bioprospection, medicinal or not medicinal, they have been destroying much more the nature than the people that they have been living in their own territories. Only to remember, that Dioscorea, when it was this for the control of population, and then it was a boom, and all the rainforest of Mexico in the south were destroyed because of the industry of Dioscorea. So then we have a lot of examples like that if people are not having the control of their own territory, it is that transnationals are coming and for me, it is the main cause that the extractivism industry is a cause of this destruction. And what we can be dealing it is the people that are living in their own territories, how to deal and how to be balancing conservation with the food production systems. And they have to be really in this sense of agroecology, perhaps not organic totally, perhaps we need a transition. We cannot impose that all the farmers have to be producing organic, because that is almost impossible, no? But it is a transition. It is a processes that are going back and forth. And about what Pierre was saying that we cannot do anything about waste. Yes, I think that we can do a lot about waste, no? And that in that I coincide with Joe in the sense that we don't need more production. What we need, it is to control all these waste processes. It is in the United States is 300 kilos per capita per year, no? That it's the waste of kilos. The production, the waste of the United States is the same amount of quantity of food that the sub-Saharan Africa produces. So in this sense, it's so high. And also there's a big difference in which phase it is this waste. And in Europe and in the United States, the phase is at the end. The consumer is the one that is wasting more food. In Latin America, in Africa, not in the industrial Asia, no, in the other Asia, no, the data, what they mention, it is the process, the waste is more in the distribution, no, when it is at the beginning of the production. So that is very different, because we are talking about transportation, about food systems, networking. So that, it is much more time. It's needed. You need much more time to ameliorate all these processes. But in the other sense, no, I think that we can ameliorate all this waste of food in Europe and in the United States very much. No, thank you, Pierre.
Thank you very much. I certainly didn't want to suggest that we can't do anything about waste. It should be a priority. My point was that it takes time, while the food concerns are really questions of urgency. Joe, back to you. Is agroecology the way to reconcile the production and biodiversity priorities?
Thank you so much, Pierre. And, just by coincidence, I was doing the keynote for the Agroecology Coalition a couple of weeks ago. And it sort of made me think, sit back a little bit, because I wanted to take a very evidence-based approach to thinking about, well, is agroecology the solution? So I went back and I tried to understand what the systematic reviews in this space are saying. Now, the most definitive systematic review with respect to agroecology actually was published, I think, last year or beginning of this year, which looked at more than 11,000 papers and then found that there were 54 papers that were basically there that could give us some high quality evidence on whether agroecology works or not, and what the evidence was. So Pierre, to your question, I'm going to try and answer it directly, but I do want to dwell a little bit on what the evidence found, right? The evidence found that first, agroecology, as we all know, there are 10 principles to agroecology. Of them, as Elena said as well, there's equity, there's participation, there's no use of chemicals. It's really important to ensure that there's coverage. So for example, the foresight work that has been done in India, agroecological practices require that there's almost 15 different crops crops or plants that are grown in one full year for plots that are adopting agroecology. Is that the solution? As Elena said, well, it was interesting when Elena was talking about it, and I think you sort of you said, Elena, obviously, we cannot expect all agriculture to become organic. And I sort of sat back and I want to put that against the question that Pierre is asking. And I want to say, why not? Why is it that we are reducing the ambition with respect to asking all of our practices to be sustainable, organic, intergenerationally equitable, not just for our generation? I think by giving and yielding that space, we are already saying that yes, human greed can come and take over. And I think that, and this is why I was talking, so one on agroecology here to answer your question. If agroecological practices for the 10 principles that we have with respect to agroecology, while also admitting the fact that agroecological practices do require far more labor, and as economists, we all know that labor markets are not always present. You don't have access to capital markets, and so you're not going to be able to ensure that you have the kind of labor that at least initially most agroecological practices require. So that's on one side. And that's what the systematic review also says, right? But second, we need far more evidence on that as well. But third, it is definitely true that agroecological practices are able to ensure far greater biodiversity than monocultural practices. But is that the way to go? And I think that it's sort of, I'm going to marry your question with the question that you asked, that you ended with. What is the norm? How can we change the norm? And it made me think a little bit. The norms are changing. The fact that Elena and I are having this debate, and that we even could dare to think that yes, biodiversity could be far more important than food production is signifying that we are changing the norm already. The fact that we are looking at the 350 companies that are responsible for more than half of the global GDP coming out from agriculture and food is changing the norm already. But I think we've got to do more. And so when we are thinking about ESG, the environmental, social, and governance safeguards that we want to ensure, I think we've got to push that frontier a lot more. We've got to push the frontier to say that not only do you have to safeguard current biodiversity, but you have to be positive with respect to your practices, right? Anything that you do has to ensure that we are supporting, that we are adding to biodiversity. And unfortunately, agroecology doesn't give us the same kind of biodiversity that we need to reverse the transgression of planetary boundaries that we have seen till now. So I want to maintain that agroecology is possibly a solution, but I think it's not enough. I think that ESG needs to be pushed far more. And I think we need to think about norms in a very different way, in a way that almost makes us feel uncomfortable. Because we are at the point now where unless we are ourselves uncomfortable and we don't feel that our own lives are going to be imperiled, we are not going to do anything about it. And that is the selfishness of human beings, which Rachel Carson also called. One more point, sorry, I'm just going to look down at the points that I wrote down, which is that we are at a point as well that it is possible. Technology, right? We have blockchain, we have artificial intelligence in practices that we are taking on board and that IFAD itself is putting forward and that we are advocating for. We know that we can use blockchain technology, for example, to then say whether we are using, even for smallholder farmers, whether we are using high quality practices that are not just not denuding biodiversity, but are actually adding to it. And I think that's what is now possible, which wasn't possible even 10 years ago. So we're at a point where we can change the norms. We have the ability to change the norms. What we've got to do is to change our mindset. And our mindset will not change unless we feel that the earth is hanging in balance. The earth is hanging in balance, and unless we reverse a lot of our practices, we are not going to be able to, we're not going to basically have a planet for ourselves. And the last point I wanted to make with respect to this was, I think, is the question of rights of indigenous peoples. The fact that we are even recognizing that indigenous peoples are custodians of 80% of the world's biodiversity today is because we are starting to change the norms, but we've got to do far more. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joe. Back to you, Elena. Let me just mention that there were two reactions from the participants. One mentioning that it's, of course, also necessary to consider ethical consumption choices and lifestyle choices. But this goes back to what you were saying about norms, Joe. Changing lifestyles, it's also a process that requires profound, deep change, and the question is how to organize it and manage it. And the second comment was that a lot also has to do with community engagement and education. So I would like you to address this, Elena, in your comments. How can higher education contribute to this process? What is the role of a professor in social sciences? What is the role of research in social sciences? And this is a GDN conference. GDN's mission is to build research capacity in social sciences in developing countries. How can we harness that to promote biodiversity protection in food production? Thank you.
Before answering your question, it's very, very relevant. I wanted to come to 2 points that Joe stated. And when I said it's not everything that will be organic, and you say, why not? And then at the end you say, well, not everything will be solved by agroecological. I will say, why not? But in that sense, what I want to bring it is, it's a process. It's a transition process. And also what I have seen, it is coffee farmers in Mexico that they are obliged to go to the organic coffee because the better prices, no? But then afterwards, they have to fulfill so many requirements. The poor of them, they are trapped in fulfilling this, no? And even the Nestle, when I was in Switzerland once, and they were having a big conference, they were so they were so proud about the code of conduct. And I said, code of conduct of the farmers, really? Yeah, because they have to fulfill all this to become organic. And I said, oh, no. Well, where is the liberty of the farmers also to decide, no? So in that sense, I think that the organic and the ecological is a transition process that has to be always in connections with the market. And I will say why now the organic market is much more expensive in our countries, no? And that is not just. And in that sense, how can we bring down the prices of the organic products? Because now the poor people are eating the industrial food that it is very cheap, and the rich people are eating the organic that is very rich and in the nutritious, no, and not contaminated, not polluted, etc. No, so in that sense, that's injustice, no? So what we have to see it is that it is a transition in agroecological and organic with the market, that we have to be relying, no, these, and if we have to force the market forces in the sense of really contributing that in the agriculture to be really valued, recognized in all their aspects. And only to come back to the point that Pierre asked, but Pierre asked a question. 1 minute? Okay. About the importance of the social sciences, no, in this process. I think they are so important. No, we have to work in an interdisciplinary way. We have to understand where are the big challenges of agroecological and organic production. We have to work with economists in the sense of how to deal with the market pricing of organic products, but also what we have to deal is with the social organization. Do we have collective action for a food system production? How are families organized or not? What is the gender issues, no, in the food system? So all these issues are social aspects. And of course, the political aspects become afterwards in the sense of access to credits, access to really have programs and policies and instruments that our governments will be pushing and would be really having the other aspect of the markets. And I think that social scientists, politicians, in political sciences, no, also they have a lot of saying, geographers, no, in the sense of the geospatial things that they were discussing before, no. So then in that sense, I think that the social sciences are key to understand and to bring alternatives and discussions in this biodiversity conservation and food production. Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you very much. I think this will be the conclusion of this debate, and I think that it was a very lively debate. So thanks to both of you and to the participants who are part of this discussion. And my take out of this is that indeed we need more knowledge, more evidence, more education, and there is a lot to do about research in these areas to help us engineer a path toward more sustainability. So thanks to both of you again. All the best, and let's hope that all together we'll find ways to orchestrate this transformation that is urgently needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Pierre.
Pierre. Very appreciate that.